People often ask me, how can you work with suicide all day long? Isn't it heavy? I answer truthfully, no. Heavy? No. Difficult? Yes, of course. Demanding many times? Yes. But heavy, no. And I sometimes wonder about my answer. I think it's about working with the prevention of suicide makes it necessary to focus much more on life than on death. After all, people do not take their lives because they long to be dead. They take their lives because they can't stand their suffering. And it's generally much easier to reinforce the things that make life worth living than to remove things that have the opposite effect. So it's really a lot about life. Also, learning how to talk about difficult matters such as suicide, death, the meaning of life, enables you to get close to people. And that's really rewarding, both as a professional and as a private person. And I have a firm belief that it's always possible to do something for a person that's in pain, for a person that's suffering or considering suicide. A short while ago, I was reminded of this. A man wrote to me. He said that he had been to one of my lectures. He learned 2 things, he said. I was grateful for that. One was that it's always better to pay attention to people surrounding you. Pay attention to how they are feeling. And the second was that it's always better to do something than to do nothing when you encounter a person that's struggling or considering suicide. So he continued, a few days after the lecture, I was walking over a high bridge in Stockholm, minding my own business. Against me came a girl, a young girl. She was crying, and I didn't think much about that. But then I remembered what I had learned. So I turned around to see how she was doing, and then I saw that she was trying to climb the fence of the bridge. So I threw myself forwards, I grabbed her at the last moment, and I was able to call for help. And he finished, I'm so grateful. And he should be. There aren't very many situations in life where a slight change in the way you think or act can actually save a person's life. And he saved this young girl's life. And if you survive a severe suicide attempt, the prognosis is really good. The majority of the survivors eventually find reasons to live and die from completely normal causes. So that's really something to remember. The prognosis is good. Is it possible to understand why it is that almost 800,000 people around the world commit suicide? Maybe not in every detail, but sometimes metaphors can help us. I use the metaphor of being down in a dark pit, all alone. Imagine this. You're surrounded by fear, anxiety, depression, chaos, maybe thinking that your life will be like this forever. Maybe even thinking that life would be a better place without me, or that my loved ones would have a better life without me. Really dangerous thoughts. And even if we haven't been in that dark pit, we can recognize some of these feelings. We know something about feeling alone, abandoned, desperate, chaotic, a failure, don't we? And that makes it easier to imagine what would I need in a situation like that. I'm sure none of you would answer, I would need people avoiding me, not daring talking to me. I would need silence. No. I wouldn't need a person standing on the edge of the pit shouting down to me, hello down there, how are you doing? What I would need is a person climbing down to me, trying to share, trying to understand, showing interest, showing that I matter. If we meet a person that's struggling with suicidal thoughts or that's feeling really bad mentally, what I have to offer can seem insignificant in comparison. A wise man taught me that it's not. The insignificant can be what matters the most. This man I met when I was a consultant at a neurological ward. He was a proud man. He had been fighting against political injustice for most of his life. He had been isolated in prison. He had been tortured. And the first time I met him, he said to me, the only thing that kept me alive during my isolation in prison was that I was able to see a small bird through an opening in the prison wall. The bird reminded me of life, and it gave me hope. The second time I met this man, he was deeply depressed. The neurological condition that he was suffering from had become worse. He was unable to walk. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't work. His wife had left him for another man. And the first thing he said this time was, Ullakarin, now the bird is dead. And I was terrified because I knew what he was saying. And he also confirmed this. He said, I have decided to take my life. And he also said, you cannot send me to hospital because that would be like sending me back to jail. So he left me with an impossible decision, really. Should I treat him as an outpatient, or should I send him to hospital against his will? I chose the former. I treated his depression, and I did one other thing that I didn't pay much attention to at the time, one seemingly insignificant thing. I told everyone at this ward to call this man at every opportunity. Call him, say ordinary things like, have you eaten today? I'm looking forward to seeing you again. I'm thinking about you. I'm sure that it will eventually get better for you. And everybody called, from the receptionist to head of the department. This man received a lot of phone calls. When I met him the third time, he was much better. The antidepressants had helped, and he said, I will not take my life. I asked him why, and maybe I was expecting an answer about the advanced medical treatment he had received. But instead, he answered, it was all the phone calls. They made me realize that I have a value as a human being and that people care about me. The phone calls became my Swedish bird. I have never forgotten this. Every meeting with a person in despair or a person considering suicide as an option should be about this, not about solving this person's problems, not about taking over the responsibility for the person's life, not about removing all the pain from this person's shoulders, because that is not possible. Instead, showing that I care and therefore I can be the reason for you to live for at least a few days longer. Take every opportunity to say that you matter to me. I appreciate our conversation. I don't want you to kill yourself. That would be a disaster. I would miss you terribly. It's never a solution to commit suicide. It's not about the words. It's about being genuine. And if you are genuine in your will to help, it always shows. You can be certain of that. We can say ordinary things. We can use change because it doesn't always show on the outside how a person is feeling. The only way of finding out is to ask. And we don't have to be afraid of asking about thoughts. After all, people do not die from what they think. They die from what they do. So use change that you observe. Say things like, I notice that you're unable to concentrate. You seem to have lost your appetite. You seem sad all the time. You used to come with us after work and now you always say no. After your divorce, you smell of alcohol every day. You don't have to feel ashamed in front of me. I've been through troubles myself. Talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. And even, I know that when you're in a really difficult situation, it's common to think about suicide as a solution. Is it like that for you? Tell me, I really want to understand. So I would like for you to bring two messages with you. The first, there's an immense difference when you're struggling with mental problems and when you have lost the power to live, when you're thinking about suicide. There's an immense difference between having nobody that cares, nobody that talks to you, nobody showing an interest, and having one person doing the opposite. We can all be that person. We have it within us. It's the power of being human. We can give this to each other. And secondly, there's never any danger in asking someone how they are feeling. We can be much better in showing that we care, and we can practice. All you have to do is practice. So choose one difficult question and start using it, and you will find that you become better and better on getting close to people. That's what comes from practicing. So you can be the person that asks, and if you're lucky, with time, you might be the one saving a life.